Hello!
Hi, everyone.
We erased what you were thinking. That feels like pedagogically wrong.
Oh, okay. So, from my memory, so sorry that we lost it all. Please do feel free to restamp if you would like.
Yeah.
Just so that we can record exactly how we're all feeling. Which polar bear are you?
I went top left.
You were top left. I was kind of feeling like the boop bear down here.
I'm also a little bit second down from the right. If I think about certain administrations or decisions, I'm like, ah!
Yeah. There's a lot of rage. For sure. Okay, cool. Okay, so, we're all over. Rage bear, though, not getting the love. Just from you?
Really?
That's fine.
Just
this
me?
one here? Yeah. Is it Rage Bear? Sneaky Bear? Not really sure.
Yeah, who's chasing whom?
Yeah. This bear is eating a narwhal, which I think is fantastic.
That's a spicy
photo.
toothpick.
Yeah. That's a remarkable photo. I'm definitely Boop Bear. There we go. Although the mother down here with two little cubs looking exhausted, I think we feel that. We know what that's like with two little cubs running around. Yeah. So there's some empathy there for sure. Cool.
Speaking of little cubs, I am just pasting into the chat some recent fox videos.
Oh, cool.
From your dairy bush.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So, a small update on how fast the Speed River is running. It is not running as fast anymore. So it was just a couple of days of some pretty fun water, and we are no longer canoeing the Speed, which is too bad.
We didn't, but it's been raining.
It's been raining. It's true. Maybe it's gone up again. So one of the really cool things is that we know how fast the rivers in the area are running. No. Because there's a website that shows you on a graph. So here, there we go. Look, that line here shows you the speed of the Speed River, and these are measured at various points by the municipality.
By the Grand River Conservation Authority.
That's right. So they can let you know, which is kind of cool.
So it has dropped down to 10 cubic meters a second. It was 23, I think, when we did it on Sunday, and 16 the other day.
Yeah.
So that was our spring freshet. It's like, there's all.
But
we were there.
We were there.
We surfed it to the ocean.
That's right. Okay, still some folks coming in. We've got a bit of a busy day today. But
you'd think we'd start.
We should. It's only 2 minutes after.
Yeah.
We have a bit of a busy day because we're going to blow open all of the things about polar bears, and it's going to be like evolution, physiology, ecology, back and forth, and it's just going to be like, whoa!
It's like all of the stuff. If you like polar bears, you'll like today.
Yeah.
If you like Play-Doh, you'll like today. If you like genetics, you'll like today.
Yeah.
If you like blubber, today's your day.
Today's your day. It's kind of all your days. And just a little kind of looking ahead, because we were looking ahead a little bit. So if everything goes according to plan, we have 2 more classes left to actually teach. So that'll be next week. And then that means our hope is to not introduce any new material on Monday Monday or Wednesday before the topic test. So if we do get through everything, then we will not have any synchronous classes on those days on the last week there, so that you can spend time, catching up on everything. We will let you know that. We'll confirm that for you. Okay. So right now our plan is to have our last class next week. And if I can just speak slower so I can draw this out and look at the actual date, it would be that our plan is for the last class to be on March 30th. Okay. But we will keep you posted on how progress is going. Okay.
There's a question in the chat as to whether or not I said if you like Play-Doh or do you like Plato.
Yeah, I understood Plato.
It's kind of both. If you like Play-Doh, you'll like today's class because there is Play-Doh.
Yep.
And if you like Plato, you might be disappointed because we're not going to be talking about the just or the unjust bear. It'll just be just bears.
Okay. I'm confused about where the Play-Doh comes in, so I'm looking forward to that.
It's in the mouth.
It's in your mouth. Oh, yeah. Okay. I got it. Okay, still folks coming in, but we are going to get started.
Doug is...
Doug is kind of, Doug the dog.
There's a bear at the dog.
There must be a bear. Yeah. Okay. So, just to go over the learning outcomes for today. Nope. We're going to go straight into the adaptations. So what we're going to, for the learning outcomes for today, I'll let you know. So what we're going to do is we're going to demonstrate sort of integrative thinking, right? You're working on your IA, well, you will be working on your IA assignment. If you haven't already started, the idea is to integrate ecology, evolution, and physiology in the context of the effects of pesticide project, right? The EPP. We're going to kind of demonstrate how you can kind of bring in all of the things by telling you about bears, and we'll integrate all of these different topics for you.
The most wonderful thing about bears is that bears are wonderful things.
They
Their
really are.
bottoms are made out of rubber and
Okay.
their tops are made out of springs.
So this is where we left off the last time, just kind of marveling at the insulative abilities of the polar bear to keep all of their body heat mostly inside. Really is remarkable.
The demon bear.
Yeah. We can do that in a bunch of ways. And one of the sort of observations of the way in which animals can kind of keep their heat is that sometimes the outside of animals are almost as cold as the environment, right? Because if their skin is like super warm, kind of like ours, they would lose a lot of heat in a very cold place, which is why we wear clothing. Our clothing surface temperature is a lot colder than our skin surface temperature, right? And so that obviously creates these layers to trap in heat. And similarly with wild animals, except of course they don't have technology for making clothing, so those clothing equivalents are physiological, right, or biological.
Is that why Donald Duck doesn't wear pants and Mickey doesn't wear a shirt?
Oh, let's not get into the deep philosophy of why cartoon characters don't wear pants.
Poor Donald.
Okay. And so this kind of idea about body temperatures being at different temperatures than like the core and all of those things, we'll get into them a little bit, but just to kind of introduce the idea, the concept is called regional heterothermy. And it just means that you can't assume that everywhere in the body is going to be exactly the same temperature, because there are some mechanisms by which it can be controlled in order to reduce heat loss. So I think we went through this already, but let's just kind of review a little bit about sort of the many different things going on, right? So it's not just about a thick layer of fur, it's also about a really thick layer of blubber that polar bears have. They've got black skin. It absorbs, sort of any amount of radiation that's going to help keep them warm. And you can see that they have black skin because when they stick out their tongues, they're black. So they've got blubber. They're also a very, very large size. And we're talking about like relative to their close relatives, like other bears. Polar bears are freaking huge, right? Their volume, their mass is enormous, even compared to a grizzly bear. And that has a lot to do with, again, increasing that volume so that the surface to volume ratio is less, and that they're losing less heat per kilo of body mass, right? Okay. But let's complicate things a little bit, because oh my goodness, is it ever really cool. I love this story. I love telling it. It just blows my mind, because it breaks a whole bunch of rules, and it's just fantastic. So you start.
So this is a story about bears and about our ability to sequence bears to, we thought, kind of confirm things that we knew. And it's a story of, through time, increasing how well we could sequence things and also realizing we didn't know that which we thought we knew. This was a paper that started out looking at how well we understood the genetics of the phylogeography, so intraspecific genetics, using a little tiny fragment of mitochondrial DNA. And so Ursus arctos, that's the brown or the grizzly bear that you see up at the top with the grizzly bear. And then you see Ursus maritimus, everybody say it, polar bear. 1, 2, 3. What the flounder? What's number 4? So as soon as we started trying to do these comparative studies of phylogeography, of how phylogenies, often intraspecific, were spread across geography to look at isolation, lots of cool things that nerds like, and that are often appropriate for understanding how well populations are isolated, particularly for things that need conservation. This was a what the flounder moment, because if you look at that, that's a brown bear, brown bear, brown bear. There's a brown bear clade, monophyletic clade up at the top. And then look at the deep branch at the bottom and you see polar bear, polar bear, polar bear, brown bear from one particular place that has the nice contraction name of the ABC Islands in Alaska. This confused all of these authors, and so they got together and wrote a story about it.
Can I just ask you a quick question, folks? Okay. If this wasn't going to be a confusing tree, so if all of the brown bears were together, where should this Ursus arctos be? If you want to just, use your stamps or whatever, where could this be so that we wouldn't be confused, right? Where would this be? Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Super. There we go, Valerie. Thank you. Yep, that's good. Or any other extension over there. Nobody would have noticed. Nobody would have said, WTF, what's going on, right? It's really important, to know that this observation was like, what? Okay, good. Thank you.
So this is a mitochondrial DNA sequence. And you remember, as you know, as biologists, about the mitochondria, it is the powerhouse of the cell.
It's the only thing I remember from the Ontario high school curriculum.
I think it's exactly what realtors should be calling themselves, as on the bus, on the side of the bus or the bus stop or the seat. It's like, Jody Schmitz, the powerhouse of the cell.
That's a dad joke.
Okay, we'll rewind this for the kids later on. And by rewind, I mean I'm going to stick 2 pencils in the screen. And that was another one. So these authors essentially talked about the fact that this is probably indicates evidence of hybridization between 2 species in the past, because the mitochondria is maternally inherited. They had a very small fragment, and it was, as you can see, like a long time ago, before you were born. But we could sequence 300 odd base pairs. I've made this tree because the data is public, so I made this tree for you. Ta-da. Next one. They continued to do work, though, and so then they published more, using thousands of base pairs instead of hundreds and dozens. And what they found was basically the same thing. There's a new species here that we've added as an outgroup. You remember that phrase from the evolution unit. So we've got the black bear, Ursus americanus, up at the top. Then we've got some clades of brown bears, Arctus, 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 and then maritimus, maritimus, maritimus. But you see, this is the confusing things. Take a look at the third down, the code on that Ursus arctus ABC. This is that island again. This is essentially more DNA from the mitochondria saying this is a cluster, this is an island, a population of brown bears whose mitochondria is telling you something weird. Yeah. And now a Plato digression.
Yeah. I really like this.
Yeah.
Is that where we're digressing?
That is. If you press, I even like, there's going to be a flesh.
There's a
like
flesh?
Oh! So that's called ancient. So do jazz hands.
Okay, can I push again?
Yes.
Good.
This is, how cool is that digression number 1? This is ancient polar bear DNA. So from a huge pile of discarded bits in, where's this island? Svalbard? You have been to Svalbard. Yeah. You've spent a lot of time in Svalbard.
Yep. Some
of your pictures that we've seen of polar bears are from Svalbard.
Yep.
But this is not one of the bears that you took a picture of, because we figure, we scientists figure, that this is a well-preserved mandible that is 115 to 130,000 years old. And they have determined some things about how it ate because of some wear patterns. But what they were able to do from the genetics perspective was take from the root of that tooth a tiny bit of the pulp. This is now my pulp. This is I'm a canine, and this is the pulp at the base of the tooth. And they were able to extract and amplify DNA to include not just contemporary bears, polar bears and brown bears across the range, but this ancient bear, to see, okay, well, does this help us if there was some interbreeding? Can this help us understand when or how? Now, simplify things, right? Because why not? This is a look from the top of the world, and we've got these colored icons indicating where the samples came from. Now, we've got brown bears from elsewhere in the world. That's the branch, the first branch down at the bottom. We've got polar bears from across their range, purple, orange, green, and yellow triangles all over the north. And then we've got brown bears from the ABC Islands in those yellow diamonds. And the ABC Islands, you can see, it's like, what?
Yep.
So they are very proximally, very close to all those other red blocks, geographically. Genetically, they are very much like the bears of Hudson Bay or of Svalbard. This is a question.
So
we have a question.
we have a question. I will find it, and then I'll pop back to the other slide so that
Is
you
it
can
in here?
actually, just let me rifle around in my tray.
Is it this?
In my drawer for a second.
It's my social insurance number.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Polar bear phylogeny. There we go. Launch. Okay. And now what I'll do is, since you can see it, I think, the question, I will pop back to the other screen so you can see the full slide. There you go. Let me know if that's annoying and you want to go the other way. But
Here's a story.
and
About
so
a bear
remember,
named
you're looking
Grizzly.
for the not valid, like definitely not a thing.
There's a question here about the IA. Do the observations for the IA on gender fall under evolutionary ecology? I don't know that I understand the question.
For the IA on gender, you mean on sex? Although under evolution or it depends. It totally depends. Yeah, it depends on if we're talking about like population dynamics. I would put that under ecology. But if we're talking about any potential effects on the future of the species, I would put that under evolution. Okay, just a few more seconds. Cool. Okay, super good. 10 more seconds. 8, 7, 6, 5, 2, 1, end poll. Share results. Okay, so the thing that is definitely not a thing is that polar bear is paraphyletic. So that's the thing that is not a thing. All of the other things, are possible things, but this one is definitely not a thing. Okay, so let's just kind of review a little bit some of the things about monophyletic and paraphyletic, if that's okay, just to kind of reinforce the idea that when we talk about whether something's paraphyletic or monophyletic, we define basically our anchor point, right? The point from which we are asking for, the nature of that relationship. So polar bears here, as a group, right, include a common ancestor somewhere when it was a polar bear, and therefore all of its descendants. It's actually brown bears that is paraphyletic, because of the fact that polar bear is kind of sitting right in the middle here. So if we were to take this group of brown bears and this group of brown bears, the common ancestor would be down here. And then, of course, because we've excluded polar bears from it, it's a paraphyletic grouping. I hope that makes sense.
I suppose you could ask another kind of question if you're making yourself questions for studying purposes. You could say how to make brown bears monophyletic.
That's right. Yeah. Anyway, okay. Super. I hope that's okay. Moving on, because
we'll break it up a bit.
The story gets like really cool.
So, do you want to do this part, or do you want?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
You were kind of on a roll.
So, yeah. But,
I was listening. I was like, this is great. I'm just hanging out.
So we have a couple of different colors that we're going to show here. This is the first one. So we've got the black edges on basically the nuclear genome. So the majority of the story phylogenetically about the evolution as we know it of... Yes?
Do you need a review a little bit about the difference between mitochondrial DNA and nuclear DNA and how those things are differently inherited, or are you good?
Throw it in the chat if you're like, what? The mito...
What?
Mito who?
Yes, please. Okay. Super quickly, but I think it's important, okay? So, in many, many systems of sexual reproduction, and I'm saying many because I'm sure that there are delightful examples where this doesn't happen, especially in plants. But in many, many systems where sexual cells are combined, where you have like what you're all thinking about, the egg and the sperm, there's quite a differential in what is actually combined in that process, right? In the formation or the fusion to form a zygote. So sperm is basically a big ball of nuclear DNA. It does not include the organelles, and therefore it doesn't include the mitochondria that has its own independent, very different looking bits of DNA. So all of them, there are exceptions, but for the rule, all of the mitochondria that you inherit from your parents comes from your mother. Or the female parent, right? So the one that actually produces the egg, okay? And so in the egg, it's all packed with like all of the beautiful organelles and all of the things, and sperm is just a delivery system of nuclear DNA. So the mitochondria that are in that egg cell come along like a matrilineal line. Is that okay? Okay. That's important. It's
important. So what we're looking at here kind of flipped on its head. So the bears are at the bottom of the screen. We've got the earliest branching lineage being the black bear, Ursus americanus. Then we've got this, and that split is, you can see the time on the left-hand side, 4.5 to 5 million years ago. So say 5 million years ago, and then 4 million years ago, there's another split for these two lineages that lead contemporarily down to polar bears and brown bears.
So this is following the nuclear line, right?
And it tends to follow the morphology as well. If we were to look, if you're identifying bears not with DNA, but with binoculars.
Yes.
This is what it looks like.
This is good.
You've got your black bear. You got your brown bear. You got your white bear.
Right.
Right?
Nice and simple, really easy story.
And then the nerds of the late 1990s and early 2000s started sequencing mitochondrial DNA of all three, and they showed this pattern. This is the orange. So this is the matrilineally inherited. This is the gift from your mother.
Right.
Right? So mine is Irish, and this is my Irish orange look at. We've got a branching lineage down to the black bears. That's fine. And then we've got two lineages that branch off, say 3 lineages. So the first branch is over to the polar bears, and then there's another branch within the brown bears. Still so good. Not so, things kind of make sense, right? They're occurring at different rates. This occurs more rapidly. The nuclear DNA, the mitochondrial DNA tends to evolve more rapidly. That's why the nodes are at different places. That's fine. That's kind of expected. But what's happening here?
Red?
Let's add another color. And I'm sorry, it's going to be red because that's what I had on hand. This is showing the likely introgression of a brown bear mitochondria that's jumping across, and that's the
And we're not talking about like a whole bunch of mitochondria just jumping away from the body of a brown bear and going into a polar bear.
No, we're talking about something that happens pretty regularly, but is often a challenge to how you've been taught to think about species. Which is, remember we talked about what is a species, and most of you were like, well, it's this biological species concept, so things can't reproduce, and that's the best test. But you know what? Things can often reproduce. And maybe they choose not to, because it's for whatever reason. But when times are tough, when it's closing time, and all of the other choices are gone, sometimes you go, well, that's my plan B, right over there. This suggests that there was a plan B.
Plan bear.
Plan bear, yeah. And so about 1,600 million years ago, this suggests that there was the introgression of brown bear mitochondria into polar bears.
Amazing.
Which then makes you ask some questions.
I have questions.
Which one's true?
And are there therefore any real polar bears?
And I'll even throw in another question. How common is this?
Right.
And I'll say, well, it's. I can tell you a story about toads within an hour of here that is exactly this story. Different species, but the same thing.
Will it happen again?
Yes. Inevitably, yes.
We have questions.
Yeah.
The answer to all of these questions is it depends, right?
Yeah.
So the reason why, for example, I'm saying, are there actually any real polar bears? Is, and permit me please to just kind of break this down in like simple Jacob's words, because I need them. What this is showing to me is that everything was going along just fine until a female brown bear reproduced, and like not just one, like a whole lot of them, reproduced with male polar bears. They produced viable offspring because it basically caused the female polar bear mitochondrial DNA lineage to go extinct, which means that it was actually the brown bear mitochondrial lineage that took over, right? And so is it like a whole bunch of polar bears now are walking around, all of them are walking around now with mitochondria that come from brown bears, which to me is bananas and amazing, right?
Yep. But it's also, so then my observation would be, and so you're the sum of the parts that make you up. And that's true of all of us at a whole bunch of philosophical or biological levels. And it doesn't mean that what your binoculars told you initially is not true.
No, it just introduces you to the fantastic complexity of
That's
biology.
right. That's exactly right.
It's wonderful. So all of the polar bears today are, no, I can't, what do you want to say? Are not the polar bears that were, right? Because they have this hybridization event that occurred. And, you know, they're just different genetically because of their mitochondria. It's amazing.
And that's not uncommon. Fowler's toads in Canada. Oh yeah.
That's the paper. If you click on it and the
takes you to
PDF,
the
it'll
paper.
take you to the paper. Oh, okay.
Question.
So, in thinking about, this is like new information, trying to figure out what's going to happen to the polar bear. In thinking about what's going to happen to the polar bear, what do you think is so let's use our stamps actually, because
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
all of this stuff is kind of important, but like, what is the most critical piece of information that you need right now in order to start thinking about what's going to happen to the polar bear over the next 20 years? And just please go ahead and stamp which one you think is like the most important that you need to know.
And thank you already for stamping kind of near, but
Yeah,
not
that's
over
good.
the words. You're very polite stampers. Oh, that's a great question. Can we talk about that right now? In the chat, the question, so would polar bears back in the day
Back in the day.
look different from what they look now? Does mitochondrial DNA affect that? Generally, no, but it's a great question.
It's a great question.
One question that you might ask is mitochondria does a job. It affects your cellular respiration. So you might ask whether, probably wouldn't affect how they looked, but you might ask, would they perform better in certain conditions?
Yep.
But great question.
Wonderful. Okay. So lots of you are saying D, which species has a range nearest the Arctic? Some of you are also saying which species has the most cubs per season, big smiley face, because baby bears are adorable. Yes, and so the other things are not unimportant, right? They are also important to consider. And I'm going to go with D because this is where we bring in the ecology. Yeah. This is where context matters. Evolutionary history does matter, and context matters quite a bit more immediately, let's just say. Yeah. Okay?
This is kind of an intersection of ecological timescales,
yeah,
and evolutionary consequences.
That's right. So when we take a look at who's next door, who's like primed and ready potentially to conflict with polar bears, we can see quite readily that it is the brown bear, right? They are closely related evolutionarily, and therefore it's not surprising that they're also right next door. It's not that they have to be, but usually if something is going to be closely related to something, it evolved from it, and therefore they are probably in the same similar area. There are fantastic exceptions for that, but it's not surprising that they would also be closely related. But what matters more isn't so much that they're closely related, it's that they're right next door and therefore a potential competitor. So how is sort of the ecological battle or interaction between brown bears and polar bears going to play out? And do we have enough information to be able to make predictions about all of that? So what about brown bears and polar bears, and which parts of their natural history or their biology or their physiology are relevant to being able to figure out what's going to happen, right? As we have a warming Arctic, right? So that's the context. It could be a whole bunch of things, right? There's all these different types of variables that we can look at. We can look at, their sort of their anatomy. We can look at their ecology, how they interact with other species. We can look at their behavior. We can look at all sorts of things. Do all of these things matter is kind of a really important part of being a critical thinker. So let's see which ones matter. Here are a whole bunch of things. It might take you a few minutes. That's totally fine. What we would love for you to do, though, is let's say in the sort of blank space associated with the trait name, if they're important for figuring out sort of shorter term what might happen, let's say over the next 20 or 30 years, put a little stamp in the sort of white space so that we're not writing over top of the actual words. So go ahead and see if we can identify some of the critical traits, and then, if you wouldn't mind, we're going to ask you why those things matter using a Menti. So I'll just pop up the code up here, www.menti.com, and the code is 4228779. And what we'd love for you to do is to identify the trait and tell us why that matters. But also feel free to stamp here so that other folks know which traits you're working on. Super good. Okay, so we're getting some why that matters about fur color, why that matters about diet, why that matters about swimming. Let's try to fill in all of these. Why does it matter? Head, thank you.
I have a dull head.
It's really good. Head shape matter. Good. I'm glad you're tackling head shape.
Yeah.
Fur, very good. Swimming, diet. Breeding, you've tackled. Okay. What about range? Does someone want to throw in one about range? Why does range matter?
Home, home on the range.
Pause. Why does pause matter? Why does hibernation matter? And then, if you wouldn't mind, let's kind of go through. So you've identified all of these as being relevant. Diet seems to be the most relevant. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear them. And as you're telling us why that matters, what I would love to know is for size. If we're only thinking about size being important, who's going to win? So why don't you put a stamp in the either for the brown bear or the polar bear for size? Who's going to win if size matters? Okay, so some of you are saying polar bear is going to win in the context of a warming warming Arctic and potential conflict between the brown bear and the polar bear. And some of you are like, maybe it's the brown bear that's going to matter. The size is better. A little unsure. That's totally fine. In my head, I think that the smaller one is gonna do better in the context of warming, especially because the physiology of the polar bear is really all about keeping heat in. They're not very good at getting rid of heat. And so if they're in a heated environment, there's going to be some physiological trouble that's happening there. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Let's pick another one. Let's pick. What do you want to pick? Maybe diet?
Diet or head?
Diet. Okay, let's do diet. Who's going to win in the context of a warming Arctic? Brown bear or polar bear? You're all team brown bear. I'm cool with that. Generalist. It's a generalist thing that really matters, right? Generalists are far more resilient to disruptions in the environment compared to things that are specialists, right?
To use some pandemic words, they can pivot.
Oh, please. Oh, my goodness. Oh, there are words that I can never use again in a sentence.
Vibrant.
Vibrant. Okay. Good. So you've shared some more whys here on the Menti, so let me just kind of pop those up as well.
Your whys whying.
Your whys whying, yeah. Wonderful. So some of these things are more about like the importance of the adaptation itself, right? So larger paws allow for more paddling. And if the brown bear was going to be moving up into the Arctic, then yeah, having bigger paws would be definitely beneficial for being able to swim around, especially compared to the polar bear, who's already this adapted, marine mammal, for sure. Diet matters. The Arctic has less plant availability, meaning the grizzly bear would have to change up its diet. Absolutely. We do know, though, that over time, especially over a period of a few decades, there would be an increase in vegetation. We're seeing an increase in vegetation in the Arctic right now. And so then we fall back to the idea of the generalist versus the specialist. And the fact that the brown bear is a generalist is actually really, really key to ensuring its survivability. This is good. I like this one about range and the ability to find food. If your range is very small, obviously you're going to be restricted. If your range is much bigger, then you may have the ability to to broaden out where you're actually foraging for food. That may increase your chances. But remember, the cost is associated with the amount of energy that you use, right? So maybe you need actually more energy or more food in order to maintain that range in the first place. Wonderful. These are all really good. Okay.
I think some other context just about them before as we leave is
Yeah.
that both parts of this story. We've just finished kind of a predictive part and preceded that with a historic part. Both of them are about rapid change. Even the historic part. Remember that red line crossed at about 116,000 years ago, right? That's a moment ago from the process of speciation. That's like really rapid change. This is even more rapid.
Yeah.
And so what kinds of changes might we expect to see? So you've outlined some. I think it's an opportunity now for us to show a video about the kinds of things that polar bears do. And before we start it, this is a BBC thing. So if you're attending asynchronously, click on the PDF, watch the video. It'll open it up in the YouTubes. But we're going to get to share it together now because it's awesome and it involves David Tennant. So, polar bears are, whether it's kind of summertime or the winter when they have the advantage of just going down through blowholes, they're looking to crush that head, right? That's a relatively soft thing, which is maybe a surprising thing to say, but once you've kind of popped the head, it's just juicy.
It's just really a big bag of fat.
And so,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And this leads to some predictions about the morphology of the head that different scientists, including undergraduate students, have recently begun to publish about how they use existing collections of polar bear skulls to make measurements of strength, how strong. And so you can read the abstract later on, and that's fine.
Very cool.
Because it is totally cool, but I like the picture. But essentially what we're looking at are the polar bear skulls lined up there on the left-hand side compared to brown bear skulls on the right-hand side, with the color bar indicating, not in this case temperature like it did when we were talking about the heat, but how strong they are. And what we're looking at is that they break. Polar bear skulls aren't as strong as brown bear skulls.
So the more red, the weaker they are.
Yeah. It's kind of like maybe the inverse of what you might picture, but if you look at it as like a breakage point, then you're like, you've got a durable and a specialized,
Strong.
just like you told us that it was a specialized diet. And there's consequences of that through evolutionary time. This then lets us go into collections and to compare contemporary collections, and this is the Play-Doh part. The Play-Doh part is they put the blue goo on the teeth and they take molds of polar bear dentistry. And they compare contemporary collections because museums all over the world, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, we have polar bear skulls. And we have modern collections, or like up into the 2020s collections.
Can I interrupt? Because I feel like there might be a critical piece of information that we're missing. Contrary to popular belief, herbivores have stronger jaw muscles than carnivores. Right. Because they're doing that. Think about the cheeks of a cow or a horse, right? These are like massive things that are very strong, right?
They have six-pack jaws. They're doing crunches all the time. They're just
That's
like...
right. And they're the structure, the bone, and all of that is much stronger than a carnivore who is essentially munching on a big bag of fat, right? So even if we think about it in the hominid line, there are hominids that did specialize more on sort of a vegetarian diet, much stronger jaw. And what we see over time with the evolution of carnivory or omnivory is a bit of a sort of weakening of the jaw muscles. So the stronger the jaw, the more likely they had a herbivorous or an omnivorous kind of a diet that required sort of much more grinding and chewing.
And so this led to this neat next figure, which is looking at kind of two aspects. And so don't worry about the unitless kind of axes are fine here. And the arrows can help you interpret things about how well they deal with tough foods like stringy things versus hard foods like really
Crunchy things.
And so historically, the polar bear sat kind of on the left-hand side. They were good at soft things, maybe tough things. But what we see in some of the more recent collections, and that's that red circle, is that they're having to do much harder work. And how they're measuring this, remember, is the dentistry is the blue goo. So we're seeing teeth damage, essentially. This is a measure of damage because of how hard the food is. And so this is evidence, dentistry evidence, from Play-Doh evidence, of the fact that the ecological changes that are happening in the Arctic right now are stressing the toolkit of the polar bear, and they're pushing them into brown bear space, essentially.
That's right. Yeah, or brown bears are being able to occupy polar bear space, right?
Yep.
Both are kind of true. In the context of the environment that is rapidly changing. So the video, right, not only just because it's a freaking fantastic video to show you,
And
but
it has the best Doctor Who.
it makes the point that this is how the polar bear catches its food. It is pretty ineffective at catching things while swimming or catching things on land. The walrus, every once in a while, it gets one on land, but it's really all about ambushing on ice. Its white color is there to help it blend into the ice. And without it, the context, the background, its ability to camouflage is totally thrown off, right? It's kind of similar to the hair that was not changing color or that was changing color at different times, right? As a result of the warming. Being white on a dark background really doesn't give you that camouflage protection either from predators or from prey that you need in order to be able to survive. So with reduced time on ice, we're talking about a reduced feeding period or feeding season. And remember, we identified the winter as being that critical feeding season. But if the winter is getting shorter, if we define it by ice time, then we've got some real problems for the polar bears, that it's likely to create this cascade of effects, right? So what could that cascade of effects look like, right? If we think about it from the 1980s to the 2000s, right? And this is body condition. This is just basically body health. Let's just say individual body health.
So higher, better.
That's right.
Lower, sad.
Yeah.
We could
very
put like
sad.
a happy face up on the top left and a. Oh,
Yep. So it.
thanks.
Yeah. Just taking a look at it, what we're seeing and what's being measured is a decline, right? And it may be a differential decline depending upon the individuals within the population, right? So you might expect females to be harder hit, females that are raising young. You may also see females raising fewer young, which is a thing that's happening. So it was really common for females to have 3 cubs. Now that is really, really rare. So we see all sorts of, sad face. Absolutely sad face.
Yeah.
That's happening right now in decline in terms of body condition.
But like you said, there's a difference in kind of the intercept, like but those slopes are the same, and it's challenging, whatever the age class is, whatever the sex is. This is not a happy time.
That's right.
To be a polar bear.
And we can even see evidence of a bit of a cost trade-off right here. This line here is the shallowest. Yeah. It's the cub's body health. Right? It's not number of cubs. It is the cub's body health.
That's a great observation.
Which means that if the females, right, here, are declining, their body health is declining, they're giving up some of their health for the benefit of the cubs, right? Physiologically, we can see evidence of these trade-offs. I did some of that with my PhD in birds, looking at how they manage extra costs in the environment and do they pass them on to their chicks. And very often we see reproductive adults that are absorbing some of the costs so that they can try to shallow out that decline at least a little bit. And then we can think back to what we told you about hybridization and go, wait, is there the potential for another hybridization event? And the answer is not only, there's a potential, it's happening right now.
At your compost heap.
Like right now. There are these pizzly bears or these growler bears that are totally interbreeding, totally hybridizing, right? And it turns out that just as before, the hybrids are also viable. They're able to reproduce. So we're right now going through potentially another hybridization event that involves brown bears and polar bears, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And also sad, and also really cool.
Yeah.
So a whole bunch of things for you to think about and to kind of work through. Yeah, just kind of some study questions, some implications, those types of things that hopefully will be really helpful to summarize everything that we talked about today. And a reminder, did
Yep.
we do this
Yes,
already?
we did it
A
already, but
reminder?
it's just a reminder about this.
This can be helpful. We've probably added some more things that you might want to add to this. But with that, we will thank you so much for your time, and we will see you next week.
Yeah. Be careful. Be good to each other.
Yeah.
Be good to you.
Be careful.
Things are not easy.
No. Bye.